developed a powerful set of techniques for dealing with wave phenomena.
And you seem to be suggesting then that the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, in their mathematical relationship one to the other as you go through the sequence, describes a waveform.
A waveform which is experienced in the world by human beings as time and history. You see, it's almost as though in Western science we're pretty confident that there are approximately 100 elements, physical elements to matter.
That's right, different atoms.
That's right, that are incommensurable. They are somehow primary. The Chinese looked not at the world of matter, energy, and space, but the world of time, and carried out a very rigorous analysis of their own perception, and discovered to their amazement that time is actually composed of elements.
And as we have then, if I can extrapolate from what you're saying, the periodic table of elements in Western chemistry, which defines not just 100 elements, but a relationship between them, cycles and patterns.
Bonding relationships, that's right.
Families of chemicals.
Right.
So we have, in other words, families of ways of looking at time.
Well, the hexagrams are the elements in the Chinese physics of time. They created a science that reinforces primary perceptions that we all have, but for which we have no science. For instance, I'm sure you've noticed that every day is rather like every other day. Nevertheless, I'm sure you've also noticed that some days are radically different than others. Well, this sameness but different rule applies on all levels in a temporal hierarchy. Centuries are rather like each other, and yet occasionally a century will come along that is quite anomalous. We call this sameness and difference nesting fractal. This is a new branch of mathematics. And quite simply, what the Chinese discovered circa 3000 BC was the fractal nature of time, that the rules of expression of temporal elements which govern the rise and fall of dynasties also govern the rise and fall of love affairs and moods.
Now you're describing this in mathematical terms, and I'd like to come back and ask you to define the term fractal in a moment, but I'm also curious about how you seem to be going back and forth between something purely quantitative and something qualitative.
Well, that's the interesting thing, you see. The Chinese understood that these temporal elements were, in a sense, creating interference patterns with each other, much in the way that pure tones struck out on a keyboard will, through their interference with each other, create a melody. So that, for instance, if I find myself sitting in Hadrian's hamburger joint enjoying a burger, by this theory, there would actually be a relationship between that act and the Emperor Hadrian's campaigns in Britain before the fall of the Roman Empire. This is the amazing thing which James Joyce used and understood in the construction of his literary works, that a man leaving his home in Dublin on a day in 1905 to buy kidneys to fry for breakfast is in some mysterious way actually repeating the peregrinations of the hero Odysseus around the Mediterranean in his campaign to destroy Troy and return to his faithful wife. Allegory is what we're talking about, but allegory has never been taken seriously by science. Analogical reasoning is definitely déclassé in the better laboratories. But in this ancient Chinese way of looking at things, everything was caused by its analogical resonances with past and future events which had the same temporal elements embedded in them. Now, it's difficult to go into this without resorting to at least charts and diagrams, if not puzzling equations with sigmas embedded in them.
Well, let me step back for a moment because we've been talking very intensively about the I Ching, which is one system, a very popular and profound and highly respected system of this type. But there are other comparable systems. For example, there's astrology.
That's right. Astrology is another one of these systems that seeks to define prepotent relationships in nature that can be known by man in order to ease movement into the future. The success of astrology, I think, is borne out by its persistence. It is, after all, one of the most persistent of human intellectual tools. It was developed 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. I think what troubles modern human beings about astrology is that it is a mechanistic system. It's like a group of cogs and wheels which all can turn at given rates, and therefore their end states can be predicted.
But then we're dealing again with the nature of nested cycles.
Well, we have a strong intuition of free will,
Yes.
and this is why I think quantum physics, with its probabilistic notion of determinacy, has been so attractive to the modern mind. My conclusions looking at the I Ching have been that it is not possible to know the future, for if it were possible to know it, life would be a determinism and thinking would be divorced from meaning, and we would be out of business. But what is possible to know about the future is levels of novelty which future states will fulfill by the happenstance of unpredictable events. Now, this is a formal way of saying we know where the road goes, but we don't know what the scenery looks like. I think where the future is concerned, we can know where the road goes, but we cannot know what the scenery will look like. People who have looked at my theory have said, well, these time maps that your computer draws, you're trying to get rid of the future. And as a matter of fact, a map of time no more eliminates the future than a map of South America eliminates the need to go there. It simply gives one a better handle on one's destination.
Now, you mentioned quantum physics a moment ago. And
yes.
In quantum physics, there are a number of different notions related to the future. One is a notion of multiple universes. Another,
the Wheeler notion.
Yes, and another is a notion of everything is probabilistic. And while we can't know with any certainty what will happen, we can state with various probabilities what the possibilities are. How does this relate to your view of the time in the future?
Well, I think that at the macrophysical level, things are rather rigidly determined, with the exception of living organisms. So my interpretation of what biology is and how it relates to quantum physics and time is really biological systems are amplifiers of quantum mechanical indeterminacy.
Yes.
They are a way of taking the smidgen of indeterminacy that exists at the microphysical level and